oftentimes it's like, yeah, I feel like I'm working really hard, but I'm not getting the results that I want. Or, yeah, I'm just feeling like blah about the work I'm doing, maybe bored, or maybe I'm just not feeling lit up anymore. And so all those are symptoms of the same thing, which is to say they need to ignite the spark again and find that connection to what's meaningful to them. Someone asked me this morning about what's your work really about? And it's about fulfillment, but at the center of fulfillment is also the sense of connection to what's purposeful for me, connection to myself of who I am, and connection to others. So if you think about that sense of like connection to the things that are around you, if you feel disconnected, that's not going to feel very fulfilling.
Tony Martignetti is a leadership coach, entrepreneur, idea creator, people connector, and a curious adventurer. He brings together practical experience and extreme curiosity to elevate leaders and equip them with the tools to navigate through change. As a former finance and strategy professional working with some of the world's leading life science companies, to now as a coach and expert in helping leaders unlock their potential and lead from a place of inspired purpose so that they impact and inspire everyone around them. Tony is the host of the popular podcast, The Virtual Campfire, where he shares lessons learned from leaders in their transformation journey. He has dedicated his life to helping people live a life of inspired purpose, and I am so excited that he's here to show us and leave us with that today. So, Tony, welcome to Prospecting on Purpose.
I am so thrilled to be here, Sarah. This is going to be so much fun. And I'm really looking forward to an engaging conversation with someone who I've really enjoyed to get to know over the past few, I say months, but it feels like longer.
I know. Well, it's interesting because you easily kind of gravitate towards people that have the same message and the same journey. So I am so grateful for you leading your time with us on the show. One way that I really like to quickly get to know people, this is my favorite question, but I'd like to ask you, who are 3 fictional characters who make up your personality?
Oh, this question was like one of those ones that just gets you, right? And I'm not saying this because this happens to be in the popular zeitgeist right now, but Indiana Jones has always been someone who I looked up to. If you read my book, you know that, because Indiana Jones was someone who I always had an admiration for. His adventuresome, his adventuring that he goes out there, and this interest in history that I've always had. So definitely Indy.
We love starters. Him. Yeah.
And then Luke Skywalker. I was a child of Star Wars, and that's one of the things that I just really gravitated towards, not because he's the main character, but because he was on an adventure and a quest to figure out who he was. And that's kind of my journey too, where I always was curious as to where I was going to go next and figure out what's the path and who are the teachers that are going to teach me my way. So Luke Skywalker. And the last one is going to surprise you, but maybe it won't. Forrest Gump.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love all 3.
Yeah. I mean, Forrest Gump, because the character he played was one who had a very outsized impact on the people around him, just because of the way his nature of who he was. It wasn't because of his intellect or because of his way of like discovering certain things. It was more about how he made people feel, and how he kept on being more curious about what else is out there.
Well, and Forrest was definitely he had a lot of pivot points through that whole life too. I mean, You would never expect that that's where his life would go. And it feels very aligned with your journey. And that's an excellent pivot point to ask you, you are also an author of a book called Climbing the Right Mountain, Navigating the Journey to an Inspired Life. And I really love the book. And I have a lot of things that I want to pull out and talk to you about the book. But before I do, would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey? Because you have had, it seems like, a lot of pivot points, not unlike Luke Skywalker or Forrest Gump.
Yes. And sometimes they're little pivot points that, created massive changes in me. And some of the things that I'll start from an early age. I was an artist as a child. I was someone who was celebrated as being, potentially someone who could make an impact as an artist.
Wow.
And then eventually found myself as I got into, young adulthood, where the adults in my life would say, hey, you should think about doing something different. What are you going to do with your life that's going to, be able to feed your family and all that? So be responsible. So I decided to go pre-med, went into to study medicine, and then quickly switched from medicine into business. And that's what kind of set me on my career path of going into business, being a finance and strategy professional in high tech and then biotech, but feeling like there was something missing in that journey. And along my my time in corporate, I would show up, do all the things that a person in finance would do, but I felt like I was leaving a part of me out. I didn't know it though. Other people did. They saw that in me, that I was someone who has a different way of seeing the world, but I tried to stuff it down because I kept on trying to show up as a person who was a numbers person or a person who was more analytical, until it started to burn me out. And I went through a period of depression, kind of really feeling like, I'm not on the right path. And I started to really think that there's got to be a different way because I'm not enjoying the ride any longer. And that's what led me to really rethink, the path I was on. And I decided to move out of the corporate world and become a coach. And that's what I'm doing today, but on a very different level. I'm not just coaching. I'm also doing a lot of advisory work and doing facilitation of programs.
Oh, well, you would be, I think, such an impactful coach because you have that experience from the corporate angle. You also know what it's like to go from being an artist to a finance guy in biotech and technology. I mean, I think it's kind of clear now to see where the disconnect is once you hear that journey.
Yeah. And I'll just share one of the parts that I really didn't kind of get deep into is a sense that like you can be all these things all at once, but we have to make sure that we don't try to put ourselves into a box where we say we have to show up a certain way. We can, appreciate all parts of who we are, but we have to be willing to accept that. And I wasn't willing to accept that at the time. I was just this myopic view of I have to be this way because that's how everyone expects me to be.
Mm-hmm.
Not true.
Oh, I totally feel that. I think that as I get older and you practice a lot of these techniques, you get better at blending. I'm going to hold up my hands here. I know this is audio, but it's like you have one hand, which is your work life or your work face, and then your other hand, which is your personal face. And sometimes I think we've been encouraged in the past to keep things separate. But if we can find a way to blend the two, kind of bring our hands together and integrate it, I actually think that we're more fulfilled in our work. We're able to show up as our authentic selves, and then we're able to enjoy what we're doing for our work so much more.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, your book, I think, does a nice job because I want to talk about coaching, but I think that some of these examples will naturally come up as we go through your book. But your book does a really great job, Tony, of giving some like little, I think you use sparks of inspiration on your LinkedIn platform, but it really does feel like you're leaving little sparks where you can start to think differently. And one exercise just for the audience that I realized the other day as I was preparing for this interview, I was reading the book. And it's not a huge book, but it packs a lot of punch because as I was going through it, I was underlining, like every other page has something highlighted in it. And I had a little takeaway or a little aha moment that I'm like integrating so much more of the book because I'm reading it, knowing I'm going to talk to you. So that could be almost like a little hack, even if you're not going to interview the author on a podcast, like read a book as you're going to ask that person questions, because I feel like I had a lot more real, tangible takeaways coming out of this book from that. So that was just a little epiphany I had. But in the book, you talk about fulfillment and you give a definition of fulfillment. Can you talk a little? I think that word is thrown around a lot without a lot of clarity behind it. And you do a nice job of establishing what fulfillment is. So can you share with us what's your definition of fulfillment?
Absolutely. And one of the key parts of the definition of fulfillment that I look at is it's not a destination, it's a mindset. It's a place to come from. And when we think about fulfillment as a sense of how am I connected to who I want to be and not what I want to achieve.
Mhm.
And I think we all attach this sense of connection to fulfillment as an achievement orientation.
Mhm.
Um, and when you change that definition, you think from that place of how can I come from a place of fulfillment, then what happens is you start to bring together the elements that attract who you want to be, that mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, that I mean, I'm thinking about my own life and my own areas of fulfillment because I like the idea of it's where you're coming from because you always
Mm,
hear the phrase, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy
exactly.
when. And you're kind of operating from a place of lack.
Yeah, and really, one of the things that I also tap into, and you might have noticed, it's the sense of like I call it like a blissful balance, where it's not about
Mm.
like, you're always feeling like I have everything I need. Well, you still want to have a striving. You still want to be like in growth mode, but also knowing that I'm satisfied with what I already have, and I'm able to kind of come from a place of appreciation for
Mhm.
all those things that I've already achieved. So that's where this balance is also an important part of fulfillment, to know that I appreciate and I also strive. Yeah.
I could see that being very relatable in a corporate environment when you're climbing, the ladder. We always hear about the
Yeah.
ladder, but you're trying to get to the next rung on that ladder. It's almost like if you're so focused on getting to the next rung on the ladder, your work of what you're doing now almost falls by the wayside.
Exactly. It's just part of the journey that you're on, and it actually feels fulfilling because it's all part of who you are being and what you have set on your path of what your intentions are. Right.
Mhm. And I would imagine then the clients that you work with in your coaching business, I don't want to assume, so you'll have to tell us, but I would
Yes.
imagine that they're coming to you because they're not feeling fulfilled.
Yeah. And the words they may use are not necessarily that.
Mm.
So oftentimes it's like, yeah, I feel like I'm working really hard, but I'm not getting the results that I want. Or, yeah, I'm just feeling like blah about the work I'm doing, maybe bored, or maybe I'm just not feeling lit up anymore. And so all those are symptoms of the same thing, which is to say
Mm.
they need to ignite the spark again and find that connection to what's meaningful to them. I recently someone asked me this morning about what's your work really about? And it's about fulfillment. But at the center of fulfillment is also the sense of connection to what's purposeful for me, connection to myself of who I am, and connection to others. So if you think about that sense of like connection to the things that are around you, if you feel disconnected, that's not going to feel very fulfilling.
That makes so much sense to me. And it's so timely that you said that because I'm pretty sure the episode that comes out before your interview is about the power of connection and why it's so important. Because,
Yeah.
and it's not just, I think one of the things that you do a really nice job of in the book that I'm going to ask you about next is this idea of the connection to self. And you talk about self leadership. Can you dive into
Yes.
that a little bit more, please?
Of course. And this is one of those things where self leadership, people may just gloss over the fact that, hey, I'm not a leader. I have, I don't have the title. I don't have these things that, make me a leader. But the reality is we're all leaders. And it starts with leading ourselves in a way that ensures that, we can be there for others, whether that means in our families, in our relationships. So self leadership is the cornerstone of everything. And when I think about self leadership, there's a few things that come to mind. It's having emotional courage to be able to really look at the narratives that you're telling yourself. Like, who am I? What is it that I stand for? What are the thoughts that are creating my world? And how can I potentially shift those thoughts in a positive way to make a better narrative? Yeah. um, this morning I was interacting with somebody, and we talked about this idea that like we have this self-talk, and the self-talk can be it's almost like having a director of a film, the movie you're making. And if the director wants to change the picture, they have to change who that director is, how the director's showing up, what do they want that film to look like. So it's really changing the narrative inside, changes the outside view of what you create.
I really like that. I think one of the one of the quotes that I highlighted in the book that really resonated with me was, once you have a vision of the kind of person you want to be, you can decide what you need to do to change in order to embrace your future self now.
Yes.
Is that that's tying into the self-leadership, self-direction?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like if you don't have that connection to that person you want to be, then it's almost like you're driving blind and expecting that like eventually you're going to get to this place that's going to make you feel something, but you don't necessarily know what that is. And that's where we fill that place with what externally feeds us, what other people think that might look like. But we have to define that on our own terms. And I think that's the crux of the whole entire book that I want people to really focus in on, ensuring that our sense of what we want is defined based on what we truly decide to want, not what other people want for us.
So when you're an artist and you're pushed into a finance career.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I appreciate all the things that have happened in my journey. They were meant for me, but at the same time, we want to make sure people navigate the journey for them.
So if someone comes to you as a client and they say, I'm feeling blah, or I'm bored, or I don't feel like I'm getting the results I want, is the first step you focus on self-leadership and getting clear on what they actually want?
It is to an extent. I mean, they may not necessarily need to be ready to just jump in and say, okay, let's look inside and start, digging in. It starts with taking an inventory and starting to understand themselves better. So I like to think of it as time traveling. We look back and look at, what has led you to this point? How do we understand who you are through the lens of the past? What were the decisions you made? What got you into this place you're in right now, good or bad? Maybe there's decisions that you've made to get into this field that were all with great intentions because you really enjoyed certain aspects of it. But maybe the blah is because you just lost certain parts of it. Maybe it's the company you're in. Who knows? Mm-hmm. And then we go into the future. Time traveling requires some going in the past. And then we drive into the future and we start thinking about what would I like to see the future look like? And when we start to paint that picture, create that vision, we can start to say I feel something when I look at this, when I create that sense of who I really want to be. And then we come into the present and think, what can I do to bridge the gap or to create that sense of where I am now to where I'd like to be?
Yeah. I love the time traveling example.
Yeah.
It's so literal.
Yeah. But even like when you think about it, where you are now versus where you'd like to be, it starts by really embodying the things that future self really wants from you. I often liken it to the fact that if your future self is a marathon runner, right? Then you can start to think about what does a marathon runner think like? What do they act like? What do they do? And those things can start to become part of your life now by you just deciding to be the marathon runner. Well, what is it? They're not going to eat junk food all day.
Right.
They're not going to sit on the couch all day. That doesn't mean you can't sit on the couch or eat junk food. It just means that you need to start taking some intentional actions that align with who you're being.
When I was reading the book, I thought of the way that I look at it. I like the time traveler example a little bit better, but I think that this will relate in an example. I'm calling future state Sara 2.0, right? Yes. So that's future version of Sara. And I have a lot of really big projects going on right now, which is awesome, but I'm laser focused on making sure that I'm delivering for my clients. I'm executing these deals. And part of, I think, what helps me when I'm in this really zone of focus is obviously sleeping well, exercising, and eating right. That's what I need to do to show up fully energized. But one of the things that happened just this week, I had a great day. It was a long day and I love drinking wine, but wine disrupts my sleep. You wake up at 3 a.m. because all the sugar's burned off and you're awake for 4 hours, And so I just feel like I know when I'm in this zone of focus, I try to not drink during the workday because I want to wake up refreshed. And so it's Wednesday night. I opened the fridge and I stood at the fridge for a while. Literally, I was like, okay, there's a Sauvignon Blanc right here, or like fruit. So I made a smoothie instead, because Sarah 2.0 would make a smoothie and honor her word to herself instead of drinking that glass of wine. But it took a lot of willpower. But I do think it was a helpful example to be like, okay, what does future Sarah need that she can do right now?
Yeah, that's really, I love that example. But also know that, you can have that glass of wine when you come to the weekends, and you make the space for the things that you really want as well. So,
oh yeah, we're recording on a Friday, so there might be 2 glasses of wine in future Sarah, immediate future. But how can we relate this to work? Because I think about like in my business, and I think that this is the same whether you're self-employed or an employee. What can you do today, or how can you operate today that's what you want future version of yourself to look like?
Yeah. Well, here's an example that is really timely. I just literally had this conversation earlier today with a client of mine. We were talking about how creating more space for, being able to maybe work from home once a week. Because how good does it feel when you can, just spend half your day doing something that's not work related? Maybe it's doing some projects that you needed to do, some personal projects, or just catching up on some stuff at home. That can be scary to people because they think, well, I got so much to do. There's no way that that's going to happen. But if you really say, hey, my future self is only working 4.5 days. And I'm saying that because maybe it's for 4 days, but 4.5 days is a good start. And that's every week. So 4.5 days is how I work. And so how do I need to act and be right now in order to make that happen? I need to plan my time so that when I'm in work, I'm working and I'm actually getting stuff done. And I'm also thinking about how do I get rid of the things that are not serving me? Because I know that if I want to take that half day for myself, I need to cut some of the things out that are not really a fit. So it's getting a little more diligent and thinking, I need to, make space for the things that are important to me. And if that half day is important to me, my future self, that's part of my plan.
Right. And examples I could think of for that would be if somebody calls you and they're just calling to vent, your colleague calls you because they need a release valve. It's like, hey, I'm here for you, but can we talk about this another time or talk about it on the weekend?
100%.
I think that there's a lot of areas where we get dragged down unintentionally and well-meaningfully, but that might help set a boundary.
That meeting that you often go to because you've been told you should go, but then you realize you go there and it doesn't really serve you. It doesn't really, you don't find yourself adding value, or you have a meeting every week and that weekly meeting is 2 hours, but in reality, it could probably be slimmed down to an hour. So why not cut that down? Because those are the things that make a difference. Time is valuable.
Right.
So I'm using that example because I think it's one that a lot of people can relate to. But, I was working with somebody in the hospital system where time is really precious for them. So,
well, that's a great example. And I think that if we all can approach work with this mentality of coming from a place of inspired purpose, then I know the phrase like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
I think we can all get from this space where that's how we're operating in our work lives. It's just going to make that fulfillment and that happiness come a lot more naturally. Yeah.
And we can support each other in our endeavors, which I think is an important part of this. And if you don't mind, I'll share something that is, it's been really on my mind lately, is this sense of we don't know enough about each other in the workplace. And I just did a TED Talk around connection, which is all about bringing more of ourselves into the workplace and getting to know each other on a deeper level. And by doing so, we get to understand what are the challenges people are facing that we're not aware of. Yeah. And when we do that, we can then support people in a different way, in a way that's meaningful, not just like kind of like, hey, let's work together on that project. Instead, it might be like, I know you need to leave at 5 because you're taking care of, someone who's sick at home. Why don't I, cover you after 5? Or like, I'll cover you to get that done, and then you can take care of me next week as I have to take care of my kids.
Right. What would you say? Because I operate from that standpoint too. I think I maybe am probably more open than the average person, but a big part of why I feel like I'm open is because I want to be someone that can hold space for others, but I also want to make sure that
Mm,
they feel like they have a safe space from me, and I'll keep their
mm,
stuff private. But what would you say? Because I do think that that's outside of the normal corporate world. It's keeping work Sarah over here and personal Sarah over here, and the two can't blend. So what would you
yeah.
say to when you encounter resistance to that?
Yeah, I've heard this from countless people to tell me like, "Hey, I feel like maybe I'm too much. Like I give too much of my 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 personal side
Mhm.
in the workplace, and it's not reciprocated, or like there's the environment doesn't support that." And there's a sense of you know being the force of change in that organization by opening the aperture and asking people like, hey, what are some things about you that I don't know that you're willing to share? Get curious. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I've gotten into is sharing this idea of it's called core, and it's get curious, the C word, about what it is that you might be hiding or
Mhm.
holding back, what makes you who you are, and ask other people the same question. What are the things that make you who you are, and what are the hobbies, the interests that you have that
Mhm.
make you unique. And then the O is about opening up. Open yourself to the fear of sharing those things, because sometimes people are fearful of like, wait a minute, if I share that, like, I play the harmonica, like people are going to laugh at me or going to think I'm
Mhm.
weird. But in reality, that might be something that, they'd be like, oh, tell me more. I want to hear about this. Like, you should play that during, we should hold space for that. So opening is a big part of it, especially for introverts.
Mhm.
So even if you may be open, it's about giving people the comfort that, hey, this is okay. You can
Mhm.
share. And then release is all about releasing any fears that you may have of sharing what you have to share, and also relaxing into this space of doing this, which really allows people to feel, at ease. Yeah.
I like that a lot. And then the
And then
E.
the E is expand, and
Ooh.
expand the circle. So once you start to get people opening up, it allows other people to see that this is a place where we all are sharing with each other and celebrating each other, both differences and similarities. Because that's great when you find common interests, but also, being able to see that, hey, this person's a runner. Next week, they're climbing a mountain, or this one's doing that. And then you can go out there and kind of be like, hey, how did that go? Like, how can we help you? How can we support you? That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love that. Core. So curious, opening up, release and relaxing, and expand the circle.
Yes.
I'm so happy to share that because I feel like that's been a big part of my personal success in building relationships with others is the ability to express interest in others, but also share personal items as well. And I think one area that might help people that helped me is I've always sold pretty technical product and complex product, and it was easy to make mistakes. I would make mistakes all the time. I still make mistakes every day.
Mhm.
Like if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing. Yeah, but I don't. I actually think it's a position of strength to share the mistake because, like, hey, Tony, I'm sharing this with you because I don't want you to have to go through the same thing I just went through.
Yeah.
And if you're a little hesitant to be so vulnerable about personal life, that might be a nice, easy way to start the core process is share a work related, vulnerability that
Yes.
just proves to you. Cause I feel the same way. I think people have so much fear that they're going to be rejected. And almost always nobody ever blinks an eye. They just like, oh, you play the harmonica? That's so cool. I'm learning how to play the bass. Let's jam band on our next
Yeah.
Teams call,
And before you know, you have a company band.
right? To the talent show. But then people are more excited and happy
Yeah.
at work. So I'm totally a believer in that. And I like that so your TED Talk was just this. When was your talk?
It was over the 4th of July break. It was actually on Saturday, the 1st of
Oh
July.
my gosh. Okay. We're recording on the 7th. So we get the first sneak peek and it comes out probably in a couple weeks, I would imagine.
Yeah, they do the editing and all that. So So yeah.
Oh, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was a great experience, and it was great to be part of, with some other amazing speakers too. So I was thrilled to be part of that experience.
Well, I think you speak a lot about, because I know that you coach for employees who work for large corporations, right? That's a big part of your business, correct?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I mean, I've done a fair amount of coaching with entrepreneurs, but also with people who are inside organizations. A lot of tech and innovative organizations that I came from a biotech background, so that's been my starting point when I got going. But yeah, mostly inside companies.
Well, I love that your message is about building connection with self, connection with purpose, and connection with others. Yeah. In your book, you have, I think, 8 guideposts in climbing the right mountain. So I love the theme too. You could definitely get the Indiana Jones theme. You guys are going to have to read Tony's book, because it goes through kind of the hero's journey and how are you going to use these guideposts and building blocks to get to that place of inspired purpose. But so you have 8 of them. We're not going to get into all of them, but I did really like, I liked Connect with the Leader Within, which I feel like we've spoken about quite a bit so far in the interview. But I also like, you have a section called Calibrate Your Being, and you talk about the HOS, which I'm going to let you explain. What does HOS mean?
Well, it really is this, and I'll give you the inside secret on this too, because it's not explained in the book. This came to me when I was actually in a trip in Peru. I was climbing Machu Picchu. And,
of course.
Of course, right?
Why wouldn't you
be? Yeah. But, I had a lot of time to think and kind of explore. And I realized that I was really being more connected with who I was at this time, instead of like get caught up in the rat race of my day to day. And I realized that, sometimes we need to get out of our element and kind of reset our human operating system to do an upgrade, right, to our operating system, because we all have this programming that we get. And after a while, it starts to not work as well. So we need to have an upgrade.
Sarah 2.0.
Yeah, Sarah
I didn't
2.0.
make that time.
Exactly,
okay. We're upgrading our hardware or software.
Yeah. And what came to me is this sense of like, we have the code, our operating code, and the B code is something that really kind of connected with this. And, code is an acronym that stands for, so the C stands for curious. The O stands for, now I'm going to remember this. Oh, sorry. C stands for centered. Got it. And I don't get too many acronyms going on.
We like it.
Centered. The O stands for open, and D is detached and elevated. But let me share like kind of the inner story of all this, which is, being centered or grounded means that you are connected to your happy place when the challenges of life and the emotional turmoil of the world kind of pushes you off balance, because that happens quite frequently. So we need to make sure we have that centered element to make sure we're on balance. Being open means that you're ready to receive new ideas, you're tolerant of others' points of views, and you're curious and open to exploration. And then detached is interesting, because people think like, oh, being detached is a bad thing. Why would you want to be that? But in this instance, it's really about, making sure that you're, detached from the outcomes. So we have to set a vision and a goal, but being detached from what happens. Because what I've come to realize is that, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is that if you get so tied up to like things being perfectly aligned to what you envision it's going to be, and then it doesn't turn out that way, then you get frustrated. So the best thing you can do is kind of play with what shows up. And you might even be surprised at how what you thought would happen is, not exactly what shows up, but something even better might happen. Right. And then the last one is elevated. Being elevated means you realize that everything in life is connected. And so you operate from a place of like, how it's not about winning or losing. It's about how do we win together? This sense of like, how do we ensure that, if we're working with other people, we find the win-win in the situation. So I know it seems like a lot to take in, but this code is really about resetting your mindset to be more you.
I think that's so cool. Human operating system is a great guidepost for how we're operating in our inner being. And I love the B code. So it's BE, like be centered, be open, be detached, be elevated. And when you were speaking, I was thinking about the being centered. I used to live at the beach. And if I had a really overwhelming day call, like the second I could get a break, if I could like run out and just run out and have a minute and look at the ocean, it totally calmed everything down. It ended up being my little hacks. Like if I had 10 minutes, I'm going to just run out, get my feet in the sand and do that little grounding. Now I have other ways to do it. I'll do a walk around the block. I'll just go sit in the yard. I'll go pet the cat, like there's other ways to be centered, but I think that's a really good one. And in my business right now in particular, I've been very interested in the be detached process because I have a vision for where I want to go. Like I expand the vision. I know you say that in your book, like the vision's there. I have an idea on how I could get there. So I've been taking action towards that idea. But what I've started to realize is that because I've been open to different opportunities and I'm detached from the how I get there, I've been having these different opportunities drop into my lap that I would have never expected, that would have never happened if I didn't take action. It's still where the vision was, but to your point of it being better, I actually think this is a way faster way I could execute it, make way more money than going through the route I was originally planning on taking. So it is really cool when you release yourself from the how, you just kind of have your guideposts where you're guessing you're heading, but it's been really cool.
Yeah. And I want to reflect on that because there's a sense of like, we make it harder than it needs to be because we put ourselves so structured into this path of like, well, I put this vision in place. That means I've got to follow all the different steps one by one by one by one. No, don't make it that hard. Once you start to create that vision and you be the person who that vision is attached to, then all the things start to fall in place. Right. Sorry. My dog's not really agreeing with that. But anyways, so that's how it all kind of comes into play.
Well, I want to bring it back to a sales example too, because I'm a little, sales champion and I like to have a sales lens on some of our conversations because it does spark so many different examples. So when I think about being detached from the outcome and being open, one of my personal strengths in sales, in my opinion, has been the ability to ask questions and listen and then be creative on how I go to market. And I've been able to find a lot of untapped sales channels that I would have never found if I went into a meeting assuming the other person wants this or assuming I need to take them there. If you go in open and curious and asking questions, you might find 6 other revenue streams or 6 other sales channels you didn't know existed. But if you go in with the assumption and the goal and what you want to get out of it, and you're not open and curious and interested in connection, you leave so much money on the table. So I'm happy that we can apply this B code to our business too, because it really is an expander.
Yeah, it's brilliant because I think everything about the way that you show up in terms of selling and just the way you connect is really how you're very successful. And I think that's how I've found success myself. It's about, going into conversations without a feeling that you need to, sell. It's about how can I make a connection with this person that goes well beyond just, how can I sell as many widgets as possible, right? It's how can I get to know this person on a level that is beyond that. And if we connect well, then what happens is there's potentially going to be some value created, whatever that might look like.
And it may not be today. It might be 3 years, 5 years from now. I can't believe the people that are showing up to support my business or that I'm working with again after 10 years. You just never know where that's going to lead. And so the more connections and the more genuine connections you can have with others, the rest of it comes really easy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and that's why I think, I talk about inspiration through honest conversation. And I think that leans itself, that's the tagline of my business is inspiration through honest conversation. But I think that also lends itself into the world of how do you sell? Well, have honest conversations with people. Don't try to fleece them in some way, but you inspire others to want to do more with you by being connected with them, having conversations that are meaningful to them.
Right. I totally agree. And I think that's the definition of success. And it makes it a lot more fun. And you have a quote you had said earlier, this reminded me, it said something about it being a win-win. And
Yes.
you had a quote in your book that says, amateurs compete, professionals create.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my favorite. I don't even know where that came from. I don't know if I don't think I made it up, but I just, somewhere along my journey, I've come across that quote, and it has been a game changer for me, because it can, the world can be very competitive. But if you come from this place of saying, well, man, if I want to expand the pie and create something more expansive in general, then the best thing I can do is to collaborate with others who see the world as something that is connected and that is more powerful when we work together.
And that's a great tie back to leadership too, because you have leaders that will compete. You'll have, whether you're a manager of people or not, but if you're a leader that's creating space for others to be successful, expanding their message, connecting authentically, like that leadership style is going to be much more impactful than the competitors, people who compete.
Exactly. It's about opening the door, not closing the door.
Oh, I love that. Well, you are someone I think who opens doors for everyone. I am so happy that you and I were able to meet each other. Truly, I think your book was so personally impactful to me. I would encourage everyone to buy it. I'll include it in the show notes and the link to Tony's website. I want to ask you before I ask you how people can work together, is there anything else you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this. You talked about briefly this: expand your vision, narrow your focus. I want to talk about that for a minute, because I think oftentimes I run into people who feel like, I don't know what my next steps are. I don't know what's possible. And this exercise is something that people come to me a lot, and they ask me, how do I take moves to the next step? Expand your vision, narrow your focus is actually a mindset change for you to see what's possible. That's what I want to share is if you feel stuck, take a step back and look around and say, what else is possible in this moment? And then once you see something that's possible, maybe you'll have multiple options ahead of you. Like, choose one lane and just see what you can do to kind of advance that one lane forward. And that's where the narrowing comes, because you can't do it all, right?
Well, I like our time traveler example that you shared with us too. It's almost like time travel to your future self and see what does that look like, and that can help in expanding your vision.
Yes. So I just wanted to share that, because I think it's a very great thing for people to think about now, when they're they can be in this place of like, what next?
Right. And would you say that doesn't necessarily have to be work related either, right? If they're expanding their vision, narrowing their focus, the focus could be running a marathon or carving out time in your day to go do a run. Work is always going to be there. So find ways to set boundaries, find ways to work towards your goals, and don't have guilt doing it.
100%. I love that. Very good.
Yeah. And then you have, so I know one other thing I want to piece on. In your book, you did have a piece that says you asked people, what are they doing for themselves? Yes. And everyone seemed confused about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we need to be able to take care of ourselves, and we need to make sure that, we're, this place where we don't see self-care as selfish. It's not selfish. If we're not taking care of ourselves first, then we're not going to be able to take care of people in a more, helping way. And I think ultimately that's where I'm always getting people thinking differently about their perspective on self-care. Mm-hmm. Self-care is a part of self-leadership.
Love it. Oh my gosh. So mic drop. Okay. Well, I think I got so much out of this conversation, Tony. You are someone who really inspires me. You're very active on LinkedIn. So I will tell everyone, follow Tony on LinkedIn for some sparks of inspiration. If people want to work with you, how else can they find you? Well,
first of all, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation as always. I really enjoy our conversations. And the best place people can find to, reach out to me and find out more about me is on my website, inspiredpurposecoach.com. And if you go there, you can find out, you can take my assessment. I have an assessment tool. You can find out where you are in your leadership journey and get some insights as to where to go next.
Awesome.
Besides that, LinkedIn, that's the place to find me.
LinkedIn, the book, the TED Talk, the podcast, virtual campfire. We don't even get into the podcast. You're putting so much goodness out into the world, and we need more people like you to expand all of the leaders within us. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.